what makes someone remarkable? Do you mind being described as the white people whisperer? What is the optimal age to get married?
That year was the first year that we ever heard a teacher talk about race.
Is the college application process fair?
You start to find the non-obvious way kind of works.
Is there like a cartoonist community? So many times when we go live with these things, it's like 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, boom.
Boom.
Dr. David Campt. You may have seen him. Welcome, first of all, Dr. Campt. Nice to see you.
Great to be here.
Thank you. Now, you have gone viral, as it were, on The Daily Show, and it was a great piece, which I highly recommend people watch. But you were described in a certain way in that piece, and I thought my first question for you would be around that. Do you mind being described as the white people whisperer? Is that a fun way to be described?
I do not mind that at all. I do not mind that. It's perfectly fine.
And what does that mean? I mean, talk a little bit about that, because for people who don't know your background, I mean, you created something that has been hugely impactful called the White Ally Toolkit, and you've been talking about this for a long time. So, like, take us inside that work, and like, what does that mean? What is that, and how was it initially conceived?
Sure. So I've been doing racial dialogue work for many years, a couple decades actually. I worked even for the Clinton administration for the President's Initiative on Race. So, and you know, my job was to be the dialogue specialist to help the president with town meetings and to foster dialogue to the nation and the dialogue guide and all that. And so for years, I worked on the problem of trying to have people of color and white folks in rooms talking to each other about our deep racial divide. And so, so I noticed over time, though, especially in the last 7 or 8 years, particularly accelerated about 5 years ago, people of color become less interested in being involved in those things. So that's one on the one hand. But on the other hand, the big shift for me was after the 2016 election, which I processed that as a massive white ally fail, in that it was clear to me that there were not sufficient discussions among white people around just the question of whether or not Mr. Trump was too racially problematic to elect. It was clear that people didn't know how to have that conversation with their mamas and their cousins and their sisters and et cetera. And so after he won, I realized that there's a cost to that fail. And I mean, yes, you know, there are all sorts of other reasons that the election happened like that. You know, the Russians, Hillary, James Comey, down the list. But with the election that close, everything matters. And so I started thinking about what would happen if many more white people had the capacity to have a good conversation, just to explore that question of whether he was too problematic to elect. And so I started this project called the White Ally Toolkit, which was designed to bring my dialogue skills, which I've accumulated over time, to bear to help white folks have better conversations. And so that's what I have been doing. I've coached thousands of people on that. And that's why they call me White People Whisperer, because I'm trying to, you know, you got a whole bunch of these woke white people, some arguably too woke for their own good, who are bringing a level of bringing what might be worse practices to trying to talk to their racially problematic relatives, and ultimately generating more resistance and not helping the cause.
Well, let's talk about some of those worst practices. So you talk about slamming, shaming, mic dropping. I mean, there's a lot of things that people do where they feel like they're doing something impactful, but actually they're really more focused on just making themselves feel a little bit better and not actually changing. Right?
Exactly. So first of all, there's some research that suggests that when people have this kind of like outrage by proxy for a group they're not in, like there's some of what's going on is that they're feeding their own ego to tell themselves a narrative about how good a person they are. So that's one factor. But even if that wasn't true, what is true is that if you're trying to actually influence somebody, slamming them and shaming them and being superior in your interaction with them and being rude and disdainful doesn't help. When was the last time somebody shamed you into new thinking, right? So part of, you can't think of it because that doesn't happen like that. So part of what is important, that part of what I try to teach people is as an attitudinal level to teach them to be compassionate, because let's remember, they're trying to teach people to be compassionate. You want to be compassionate yourself, right? But also, that's just an attitudinal question. There's things to do, things like ask questions, right? To ask questions, to hear from people, because people will listen to you more if you listen to them first. How do you listen to them first? You ask questions. What do you ask questions about? You ask questions about their experiences, and not just their beliefs, but their experiences below their beliefs, because those kind of conversations are more connecting. They fire up your mirror neurons so that you identify with them, they identify with you when you're telling stories. That doesn't happen when you're telling facts, right?
Now, now how do you get that, like the rage that we like? I kind of liken it to, like, I mean, just to take it out of the racial context for a second, like the rage you feel when you get cut off, right, in a car is like immediate rage, and you have to somehow talk yourself down from that. And a lot of people really don't have that skill, or at least they haven't practiced it.
No.
So like, how do you help people get past that initial kind of gut reaction of rage to then be able to do some of the things they're talking about in terms of compassion and everything?
Well, the critical thing is to, whether it's through a book or through one of my videos that you've seen videos on the on YouTube, that I have some videos people buy too, but the critical thing is to get people to want to step down from that enraged state, right? And to have them practice relaxation methods and methods of rekindling their compassion for people when they're not enraged, so that they remember, okay, when somebody says something racially problematic and my impulse might be to become enraged, wait a minute, I'm going to practice the race method. My method is called the race method: reflect, ask, connect, expand. We can go into it if we want to. The point is to make a choice, because out of recognition that me getting enraged is not helping solve racism. Part of what we have to get people out of is the idea that you're really helping the cause by the fervor in which you attack people, when in fact you are doing the precise opposite of what you supposedly intend, which is to try to help solve racism. So how do you do it? I mean, there's relaxation techniques people can do. There's deep breathing. There's reminding yourself.
Just breathe, right? I mean, that's a big part of it. Just breathe. Yeah.
Think of the person as a 5-year-old taking a bath, like the naked child strategy, right? There's also the various strategies that I try to help people do, but ultimately you have to want to do it. You have to make a decision to, I'm going to approach this differently. Now, you still need to do things, but you got to make that decision first.
You know, when they have the bull in the middle of that ring, right, and the bull is charging, like what you don't see is right before that bull charges, like they've been poking it and like getting it angrier and angrier before it runs out the gate. And I wonder, like, to what degree is media doing that to us in terms of like making us angrier and angrier before we even have that dialogue with someone?
Oh yeah, I mean, I need to see. I think there's a movie called The Social Dilemma, which is about the way that social media has like geared us up to be at each other's throats. I haven't seen it yet, but there's little doubt to me that we have an outrage-based culture, and that social media is helping with that. Now, that's true, and it's also true there's something special going on with white progressive people, because like I saw a poll once of a few thousand people, so it's a reasonable poll. I think I read it in the Washington Post, and they looked at what is the frustration level that people have when they're talking across the I like Trump, I don't like Trump divide. And white progressives were like off the chart in comparison to Latino progressives or black progressives or conservatives themselves. So there's something going on with white progressives where they feel that it's important to really get all agitated, even though the people who most need to be having conversations with their cousins and their friends, the people who have access to people who look at racism differently, are the people who are least capable of having it. So yes, I mean, there's all sorts of cultural reasons, some of which I can't explain, some of which have to do with self-gratification, like I mentioned earlier. But ultimately, I don't mind at all telling white progressive people, look, you're using your privilege by like indulging this emotion when what you need to do is to get a hold of yourself, right? Do what people of color had to do for a long time when we're dealing with the problematic white people's attitudes. Pull yourself together and operate like a spy. Operate like I'm gonna have a long-term perspective on this. I want to learn more about this person. I'm gonna look for the opportunities. Black people for hundreds of years had to do that and to negotiate life within a racist system. It's time for white people to start skills, and it's good for them spiritually anyway, because ultimately, it's really important to remember, I have some responsibility for my experience. Just because somebody has some problematic attitudes doesn't mean I need to get out of control. So, I don't think you can just do that all the time.
And you've given lectures nationally to lots of different audiences, kind of talking about many of these topics in different ways, and you frame it in a lot of different ways. And so you probably, I don't even know how many tens of thousands, maybe hundreds of thousands of people you've reached over the years. I wonder when they come to you and they talk about using some of these principles, is there some percentage of them that get it and some of them that are just hopeless, or does everyone have some capacity to kind of move and do this if they just choose to do it?
Well, I mean, everybody has the capacity. I mean, many are called, few are chosen, right? So certainly, I know that the methods that I teach are based on universal principles of conflict resolution, neurobiology, and persuasion science. Now, can everybody do them all the time? No, but certainly, I cannot give you the track record on how many people are successful, but I do get a fair amount of feedback that people have transformed their time at Thanksgiving, or they've transformed a relationship with somebody. I mean, basically, if you offer people compassion, usually you can change relationships. You can change the dynamic. You may not change their attitudes. You often can, but certainly you can make it so that they're listening to you at a different level if you offer them some compassion-based strategies and just some compassion and back it up with good communication principles. So, I cannot tell you how many people can do it or not. It's all a relative thing. But I do know that people come back and say, not only am I dealing better with my kind of racially problematic aunt, I have a better relationship with my spouse now because these principles of communication are universal principles.
Now, sometimes I think that to some degree, the willingness of all of us to make that shift is based on us coming into a situation where we're sort of open to it, right? It's the timing of it that happens. And one of the things that I noticed in the way that you share a lot of your content, and in particular your headshots, right? Like one of the things we did when we put together this the show is we had headshots, and you've got a couple of different ones. You've got some where you look a little bit more serious, more like the spy, I gotta say. Some where you look, a little bit less serious, more natural, more personality driven. I'm curious, like, are you intentional about like which headshot you use in which situation? Because you've got a variety there, right?
That's really funny. I do have a variety. It's interesting. Like in a lot of my community work, I do both community work and corporate work. And in my community work, I often am dressing more like the left one, where more of an African type of garb, because and that's kind of toned down. I sometimes wear much more dramatic African clothing, because part of what I found it useful to remind people is that I'm not approaching this as an apologetic Black man. Like I'm like it, and sometimes I often wear African clothing to remind people, yeah, I'm wearing clothing that if you wore it, people might call you out for cultural appropriation. I'm not. This is not an apologist strategy. I am unapologetically Black, and saying that white people should be behaving differently when they're trying to talk to their people in their circle, and differently means more compassionately. But yeah, it's not about letting people off the hook. It's saying use you're what you're doing now by blasting people or not saying anything is a privileged move itself, right? And that you need to be doing something different. So I manage my image that way. In the corporate side, I tend not to dress like that because that doesn't work as well. But people don't like to. But
it's interesting. I'll pose an idea for you, which is actually based on a friend of mine, Dr. Francesca Gino, who's a professor at Harvard, and she wrote a book about being a rebel in the world and in business. And one of the things she talked about was going into, as a female lecturer, going into class at Harvard and basically dressing two different ways. The first way she dressed was very professional, the high heels, like, basically what you would expect in a corporate environment. The other way, I think I remember she talked about walking in with like red sneakers and like, just having like a little bit of personality. And what she found was the time when she walked in with those red sneakers, like she had more respect, more people paid attention. All of these things, surprisingly for her, happened because she walked in with that personality. And I wonder if, like, when you went into that corporate gig, if you dressed like that dress on the left, maybe you'd actually get more respect, more authenticity, more
maybe maybe that's true. I know that I had a publicist a while back who was trying to place me on the media. Maybe media is different, and they're like, too many of my headshots, like half were the corporate style, half were the African style. And they're like, I don't know how he's going to show up. So they didn't want to book me, even though I would have been interested because they were confident that I would look right for their show. Now, in the corporate gigs, playing this game is often difficult, right? Because you got people who will reluctantly commit to some equity process, and they're extremely skeptical of it, but they're getting pressure to do it. So, but it could be that they're not used to. I'm not signing that check to some African-looking guy, but you're right. Maybe it goes the opposite way. But so I don't know. These things are hard.
Who knows? I mean. Yeah, you're right. Like, look, at the end of the day, it's like all about the level of comfort, right?
Right.
And that's totally true. So I wonder, when you look at the range of ways that you've put these ideas out there. So you've got books, you've got training courses, you've got talks, you've got videos, you've been in the media. Can you contrast some of those types of messages and what has been most effective? Like, is the number one most effective thing getting face to face with someone, or is it having a viral video on the Trevor Noah show, or is it like something else? Like, can you contrast?
It's funny you ask that because I love doing live workshops. I really love that. I love audience interaction. It's very nourishing to me. I have found, though, since it's under COVID, you can't do that. I have found that what we do more of now, although I do sometimes one-time events are usually more speeches, that my workshop mode is more like extended, like multi-contact courses. Like we're doing one in January, doing my part as an anti-racism ally. It's 4 sessions over 3 weeks, and I found that mode, I think the learning is deeper. People get it more than the one, like the half day or the full day workshops I used to do and will go back to doing, because I think I'm trying to get people to really shift how they communicate, to shift both their attitude and how they actually communicate. As I said, I get people to ask questions, the race method: reflect, ask, connect, expand. You got to calm down, reflect. You got to ask. You got to ask questions, connect. You got to find something right in what they say before you try to expand their thinking, typically through a confession about how racism is real within you. That's the core thing I teach people to do. That requires a shift, because first, people, as you said, people are not trying to calm down. They're all used to being agitated and think that that's the right thing to do. Second, once they disagree with somebody, they're not used to asking questions and want to really hear an answer, right? They're not used to that. Then they're not used to connect. They're not used to saying, I'm going to find something right in what this person says. It's the ABC rule: agree before challenging, right? They're not used to saying, I'm going to find something I'm going to connect with that to make the person right before I then try to make the person expand their thinking by confessing a problem of my own, right? So it's a multi-level shift how people communicate. So I think that the reason that I find that the online courses are pretty effective is because it gives people, we set it up so people practice. They have homework after each class, and they start in the shallow water. They start with the ankles in the water, knees in the water before they start to wade, right? So I find that I love giving speeches. I will go back to workshops, but something special happens in the multi-session course. I think a deeper level of learning is possible.
That's great. I mean, I wonder, we're sitting here right now, we're recording this right before the Thanksgiving holiday, at least here in the US. And I love the idea of homework. I love the idea of the course. Since we're less than a week away from Thanksgiving, maybe we could talk a little bit about the crash course. So we're about to get in front of, maybe we're doing this holiday on Zoom. Some people are kind of getting tested for COVID and then gathering together. But many of us are going to have that moment where we're dealing with maybe this is a stereotype, but like the crazy uncle, right? The crazy racist
uncle. Crazy Uncle Tony.
Yeah, the crazy racist uncle, right? And so what do we do when we're faced with that crazy racist uncle? And by the way, I wonder if maybe you could talk also about, like, why is the crazy racist uncle racist?
Okay. Well, let's deal with the first thing first, right? Not the deeper issues we'll talk about in a second. So what do? Well, first of all, I have a new course just came out a couple days ago called The Holiday Survive and Thrive Guide. You can get it on thedialoguecompany.com, and it's specifically designed to help people negotiate these difficulties. And I've constructed it, even though it's progressives can use it and conservatives can use it, because it's really about setting up the conversation in a way that uses these best practice principles. So, but in terms of what people should do, you start out by, you got to ask questions. Somebody says something racist, you got to calm down. And maybe you've practiced some relaxation methods, which we outline what some of those are. And you get them to ask a question, not more about their beliefs, but about the experiences that drive their beliefs. Because basically an experience conversation is more connecting than a belief conversation. As I said, you fire up your neurons. So you try to shift the conversation to talking about beliefs and not just experiences. That's important. Once you do that, I mean, it's a similar method. You talk about some experience that they think justifies their belief. Then your job is to say, okay, you have them tell you a story. Then you want to say, what in that story can I agree with that's like the cousin of their point? So they say that people of color shouldn't complain about the police because everybody knows if you just act right, you get treated fairly. Well, you don't believe that, but you do believe there are good cops out there. So you tell your good cop story. That's really interesting if you say that, Uncle Tony. And you tell, let me tell you, I had a good cop experience. And Tony will be nodding his head because you're agreeing with him through an experience, identifying with you. So you go to an experience that justifies your belief. And you've trained Tony on some level to at least find your belief, your experiences, a reasonable source of wisdom. And if somehow this conversation really got off the ground, maybe you'd say, Tony, so have you ever, have him say an experience related to your belief, but that may or may not happen. But you've already shifted the conversation if you just go through the three quadrants of the four I said. What they think their experiences that justify their belief, your experiences that sort of support their belief, and then your experiences that support your belief. Just by having an experience-based conversation, you're in a whole different mode than the clash of beliefs, where he's bringing up facts that you don't believe, you're bringing up facts he don't believe. That you don't need to do that. You have much more connecting time if you shift the conversation to experiences anyway.
Yeah, and it really strikes me that, I mean, really what you're talking about is like finding enough common ground, which ironically is, I mean, at the end of the day, like, you're related. There's got to be some common ground. It's not like you're talking to a complete stranger, at least in this holiday context, right?
Right.
And I think one of the things I think I saw in one of your videos was that you were reminding people that an argument or a debate is not the same thing as a conversation, and you're not trying to
debate versus dialogue.
Right.
It's debate versus dialogue, right? What you're trying to do in these kind of situations is you're trying to shift the exchange from a debate where both people are trying to find what's wrong with the other person's idea, trying to shift it to a dialogue where you're listening for what might be similar. You're listening for what's true in the other person's idea. It's a whole different way of listening. It's a whole different way of participating. And the way you do that, an important way of doing that, is to focus on experiences, not just beliefs, experiences below the beliefs. So you ask a question like, that's interesting, Uncle Tony. Tell me the first time you started thinking like that. Tell me some experience you had as a kid that made you think that way. Or you say, so that's interesting, Uncle Tony. Tell me the last thing that happened that made you know that was true. So you ask some recent experience. But the point is that you don't want to have the conversation just based on a belief. You want to go beneath that because that's a more connected conversation.
Yeah, now it strikes me that we're at this moment right now where yes, we're talking about racism, and we're talking about seeing other people and appreciating other people and having the dialogue. And you're the dialogue guy, right? I mean, that's your whole brand. We're also at a time where there's a lot of division, not necessarily about race, but about everything that's happened since the U.S. election. There's some people who just don't believe that it was real. There's other people who look at that and say, how can you be so stupid? Like they counted the votes, he won. This guy isn't conceding. Could the techniques that you have built around helping people talk about racism also be used to help bridge that divide between he won, the election's over, he didn't win, we're still counting votes, and those two camps of people?
Well, yes, but they can be used, but it's a little different, sort of. What you want to do, like the idea that the election was rigged is so crazy. You don't want to go right at that. It's just like if you're trying to get somebody out of a cult, you don't tell them how stupid the cult is, right? So I think that in this situation, with these people thinking that the election is rigged, you just kind of look at them like people look at family members who are in a cult. You're not trying to go right at that. But what you can go at are things like their experience of loss, right? Everybody, like these people are really disappointed. Well, if you've been disappointed, especially if you can think of some election that wasn't 2016, then you can relate on the experience of having experienced loss in an election, disappointing loss. And that is going to be much more connecting instead of trying to fight on some weird belief that their attachment to it is kind of irrational. Instead of doing that, talk about what you have in common, which is you've experienced deep disappointment at the loss of an election. You can talk about how great it was that so many people came out to vote. We had this election. The more people voted, a high percentage of the American public voted of the voting age public voted than ever before. Because by the last time the percentage was this high, women couldn't vote, and Black people weren't voting either. So I'm just saying that there's something to celebrate. And if you're trying to build some bridges of connectivity with some relative, you stuck in the house or you stuck on the Zoom meeting as politics comes up, you don't want to have a disconnected conversation about the voting process when they believe that it was rigged. You want to have a connected conversation about how disappointed you are, the fact that they're disappointed and you've been disappointed too, the fact that so many Americans voted, the fact that people predicted violence and it didn't happen. I mean, there's things to connect on, but including the deep, and then again, the grief that these people are feeling is important. Now, you asked the question, why do they believe this? Like, well, what's going on with those? Why is Uncle Tony racist? Well, sort of the next level of work, if we're going to talk about what's the next level of doing race work, a whole bunch of white folks have a lot of grievance about how America is changing. And if we're really going to move forward, we got to train white people to deal with the white grievance of their comrades without judging them. Because you don't deal the judging them is not the way to get through that. You gotta coach them out of it. You gotta love them out of it, and that's white folks' work to do. But they can't. They're all mad. It's not gonna be helpful. But I'm just saying that if we're going to get people, if we're going to have a real moment of racial reckoning, a whole bunch of white progressive people have some work to do with people in their circle. That requires that ultimately going to require a grievance issue.
And it strikes me that really at the heart of a lot of what you've been talking about is this idea that we can't see changing or shifting perception as someone else's problem. Like, I'm right, I'm all good. Everyone else just needs to evolve now, because we have to be able to do the work. And we have to be able to spot those deficiencies in ourselves as well. And if we don't,
I mean, I say it frequently. Like right now, what a whole bunch of woke or wokety woke white people do is when they're trying to persuade their relatives, their whole attitude is, the nation is racist, you racist, me, I'm fine. And that's not very persuasive. Better is, I sometimes have these racially problematic thoughts. And it seems like the people of color complaining about why people have those. Do you ever have those? No? Oh, well, let me tell you about the time I did, right? And we need more invitation and less accusation if you're going to move people. So it's it requires a shift in how you think of it, in how people think about it, which is why I said those multiple contact courses are particularly effective, because the shift is on many levels. Well, some people can get it from one dosage, but a lot can't. It requires a big shift.
That's such an important thing. I think it's a great argument for why the work you're doing is so important. I just want to say thank you for sharing some of your insights with us, being part of the show, being here, and for all the great work that you've done. I mean, it's just so valuable on so many different levels. And I think that it's just something that we can all benefit from and we can all learn from. So thank you for joining me today.
Thank you for having me on your show.
You're welcome. To everyone else who's watching, thank you for being part of this episode of the Non-Obvious Insight Show. We have greatly enjoyed talking about non-obvious stories, having Dr. Campt here to talk about how to shift your perspective and to appreciate with empathy all of the people who don't necessarily think like you. We will be back after Thanksgiving, after taking a break next week. We'll be back again with another episode of the Non-Obvious Insight Show, featuring more fascinating guests, more interesting stories. And until then, just a quick reminder from me to always, always stay non-obvious.